Learning JavaScript can be hard, but one thing that makes it extra hard as a beginner is that while you are writing JavaScript for the first time, it's easy to make silly mistakes, but you get no helpful errors from the JavaScript runtime. Consider the very simple example of the built-in JavaScript parseFloat function. This function takes an input string, and if that number can be passed into a floating point, that is the number value that it returns. And of course, it works perfectly fine with this particular string. Now this function is really designed to be used with strings, and you shouldn't be allowed to pass in a number. However, if we do make the mistake of passing in a number, it actually works fine without any errors. Now you might think that this is perfectly fine, and I don't necessarily disagree with you, except for the fact that this is a completely useless function call because there is no need for parseFloat in this particular case, and I'd rather get an error and not have just code lying around for funsies within my codebase. But there is a thing that is worse than useless code, and that is invalid code. Now since we haven't looked at arrays yet, here is a very simple example where we have an array that contains two numbers. Arrays are sort of the lists of JavaScript, and you might think that if you want to join two arrays, you could just use the plus operator. So if you have an array containing 24 and an array containing 48, if you combine them, hopefully you should get an array that contains 24 and 48. However, if we were to run this code, instead of getting a valid result or an error, we get this strange stringed concatenation of the values of the different arrays.